Welcome back to the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Hope you're having a fantastic day, because today, maybe we can make your day a little bit better. We're going to be talking all about some Bionicle stuff today, but more construction focused than specifically Bionicle. We'll be talking about some Hero Factory focused mocks from the Bionicle community, or the Hero Factory community, to inspire you yourself so that you can build your own cool stuff. But even still, it's a little less Hero Factory and more Villain Factory, because today I want to be focusing on some of the bad guys from the Hero Factory world. Some of these being pre-existing characters from the lore, others being made up ones, and others just straight up being inspired by typical Hero Factory sort of aesthetics, themes, ideas, all that sort of stuff. But before we begin all that, quick little programming note, as it were. I'm sure you've realized, hey, where was Biss last Saturday when I normally post the episode? This is the first time I've been in front of the computer for almost the whole week. It's been a very, very busy work week for me of late. So unfortunately I had to delay the episode ever so slightly, so slight apologies for that, but here you go, you're still going to get it, and of course I'll get back to posting it in the regular scheduled time of, Saturday around sort of 4 o'clock Perth time, or roundabout, and so you'll get it at the regular scheduled time. Apologies for the slight delay on the episode, but you've got it now. So, let's dive into some Villain Factory, Hero Factory inspired mocks, shall we? The very first mock that we've got today is Kuroda 2.0, and this is by WowBlock. So, obviously Kuroda was a very awesome Hero Factory set, one of my favorites, I would argue, although all of them are pretty cool, hard to pick favorites. But what do I like specifically about this version of Kuroda? Well, the original Kuroda set was actually quite sort of skinny and sort of slim in design, which I think was great. I think it kind of fit the aesthetic because he was sort of this villain that had, his name's Kuroda. He had sort of corrosive acid-like powers. And I don't know, it kind of makes sense to me that it's sort of this sort of slightly more sort of sneaky, sinister character. I kind of get this sense that he kind of skulks around and, kind of finds different things that he can kind of do, almost like graffiti, sort of little damage on bits of property or people, or kind of sneaks up to attack people. That was always the vibe that I got from him. But I think it also works really well to give him a more almost sort of like industrial style look. That he is this sort of hulking, bruising character that almost is sort of a lot more kind of destructive with his acid powers, perhaps, and maybe doesn't even just use his weird elemental acid powers and actually kind of likes to sort of bash things around, perhaps. I really like the two different takes on the character, the official versus this fan-made revamp here. I think it's certainly something to consider if you are planning to revamp a pre-existing Hero Factory or even Bionicle character. Really have a think about what sort of, the way that they would maybe even use their powers, the way that they might fight, the way that they would hold themselves, the way they'd walk, talk, or just live their life. And can you maybe somehow actually reflect that in the way that it's built? I think that's just really cool to see. One of my favorite little details about this version of Kuroda here is how he's added these cool little barrel pieces on the arms there. I like the fact that because this guy is a lot more sort of bulky and big, he can kind of get away with having these really heavy barrels that I imagine house the bulk of his, corrosion, acid powers and things. And the fact that it just sort of oozes out of the arm like that, there's something sort of surprisingly almost sort of industrial like that. It almost looks like this could be like a transformer, and it could transform into some sort of weird, chemical carrying truck or something, and those would be the containers on the back, although they'd be quite small of this transform, but that's besides the point. It has a bit more of an industrial flair to it, and it almost reminds me of an action figure I picked up recently, actually, of the Crimson Dynamo, a Marvel character. And if you take a look at the action figure, which you'll see on your screen right now, if you kind of take a look around the arms, there's these sort of like little canisters, these little blue canister things. I'm not hugely familiar with like exactly canonically what those are in Marvel, but it certainly looks like it sort of houses some sort of, arc reactor or some sort of power source or weapon of some kind. And it seems quite fitting on this larger, industrial-like character like we spoke about before, that it looks like a sort of mech suit that they've constructed for themselves on Kuroda here, very similar to Crimson Dynamo. So I like the sort of similarities in that sense. I don't think this was direct inspiration for this revamp per se, but I like the idea that on these sort of hulkier, bruising characters, you can kind of get away with having these large sort of power sources or very sort of heavy-like objects that do something for the character, whether it's a weapon or just a cool-looking aesthetic. I think that's just a fun little detail. I think works really well on just for the general size of this character here. I also like the fact that when you look at Kuroda's mask, it has that cool sort of like rhino-like horn. And, kind of reminds me of Rhino from Marvel. Of course, that Rhino is a much more sort of bulkier character as well. So even just kind of taking a little bit of inspiration from that, perhaps. Again, probably not the inspiration for this specific model, but it's certainly something you could draw inspiration from. When I look at this version of Kuroda, especially with some of the poses that he's in, it does look like he'd maybe charge around, whack things, ram things with his rhino horn, all that sort of stuff. And I love that. I think that fits the look of this character perfectly. And it's amazing how well that also fits the mask. I kind of almost never really noticed the sort of rhino-like aspect of that on Kuroda's mask in the past. And it just seems so fitting for the character, actually. So I think that's interesting too, to study some of those pre-existing pieces that appeared on these sets. And is there some sort of little subtle element of it that really wasn't accented in the set that you could really draw out further? Can you make him look more rhino-like because he has a rhino horn? Or, maybe it's got some sort of like tusks almost on the mask. Could you make them more sort of like elephant-like or almost sort of Viking, like Dovahkiin-like of some kind, Yeah, really, really kind of play with that sort of stuff. Because I think that's what makes a revamp so exciting and different and new, but also can still honor the original. I think this is such a great example of that. So really, really nice work here, and just awesome to see Kuroda in such a different but still very fitting light. I also really enjoy, on this revamp here, the general arm design. It's quite similar to the original version of Kuroda, but again, it's quite different and a lot more posable too, which looks really cool. But I also like in some of these photos here how he can kind of move his fingers and you can attach different sort of beam elements and things there. And it looks like he's got some sort of cool kind of like charging attack, a little like kind of firing laser of acid or some sort of energy blast or something. I think it looks really cool. I think it's a very distinct and different weapon that, again, just looks so fitting for the character. I really like that. And certainly I can imagine that being quite fun if you are building some sort of revamp or character like that, to introduce additional elements that could act as some sort of power blast or weapon or flamethrower or bullets or, smoke effects or some stuff like that. There's certainly a lot of pieces you could play with from System and even from Bionicle that could just give some nice little finishing touches like that. So maybe you've just finished a mock currently, can you introduce some of that sort of stuff on there to really elevate it in an interesting and unique way? I think that's a really fun detail on this guy here. So yeah, I really like this. There's some really awesome changes to the aesthetic of Kuroda here, which just work beautifully. So love your work, good sir. Let's move on now to the next mock. So this mock here is by the _double, and this was built for Hero February, and this is the city Silica. So Hero February, for those of you who don't know, was a little fun thing that some people came together and sort of hosted. It was just a sort of like festival idea during the month of February, and it'll most likely happen, well, it will happen again next year, where, hey, it's just the month of February, let's all build some cool Hero Factory mocks. So I love that idea, why not? So hey, maybe next February, you could build some Hero Factory stuff too, could be fun. Anyway, I love the look of this guy here. There's something so quirky and different about him, and I think that is really ingrained, in my opinion, in the world of Hero Factory. Bionicle in itself was a little bit more sort of serious and edgy, for lack of a better term, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but I think Hero Factory really leaned into being a little bit more sort of quirky, fun, a little bit obscure, and a little bit sort of almost ham at times, which I loved. I think that was perfect for it, and it was a great way of sort of separating it from Bionicle, which, makes sense. They're two different things in that sense. And so I love the look of this character here, that he doesn't even have a neck. He's this weirdly proportioned and shaped creature with, tiny little itty-bitty spiddly limbs and a wheel for legs, big old mouth, big old eyes, and a big old jaw with a cigar in it as well. It's just a quirky, very different character that's so fun. And I love the fact that this guy has this aesthetic of almost like a mafia boss, or even just some sort of like businessman or like movie producer. And they'd be the sort of person that maybe isn't actually that strong, but has a lot of influence naturally. And I think that's so fitting and so cool. And I love the idea too of kind of picturing the rest of the world that this character could inhabit, that he runs some sort of criminal syndicate within the Hero Factory world, and the hero's got to take him down, but maybe he's also like the mayor of the city, and he's got all this power, and he runs all these businesses or something, and it's like, how can we take him down, I think it's just so fitting for that world, and it's so quirky and fun. There's just a lot to love about this character. I think it fits the world amazingly well. And I think that's something to note, because obviously this is called the Bionicle Inspiration Series. The bulk of the episodes we focus on not always Bionicle specifically. We can focus on characters that fit into that world, but there's also a lot of characters that we see that are just from people's imaginations, random different stuff that is built with Bionicle pieces or construction pieces, whatever word you want to use. And so I think it's just really interesting to really pay attention to what the differences are on Hero Factory focused characters, how they differ from Bionicle ones, or how they even differ from just the random crazy creations that people make that don't even fit into those universes. And yeah, it's just interesting to see the differences there, at least in my opinion. And I think it can also just lead to some maybe deeper thinking for you, the listening audience. You know, what sort of kind of personality do you want these characters to inhabit? Not even in terms of like who are they, but just, you know, it's the difference between, say, you know, Star Wars or Sesame Street, for a really weird example, where, you know, the characters in Sesame Street are all sort of happy and fun, and they're all, you know, puppets. They're quite furry in texture and all that sort of stuff. Whereas Star Wars, it's a little bit more sort of almost, you know, samurai inspired and, you know, space fantasy opera, all that sort of stuff. You know, dark wizards and warriors and all that sort of stuff. You know, like what sort of different world do you want to have your characters focus in? And so it's just interesting to see how some of the pre-existing LEGO themes have done that, and how you could translate that to your own characters. You know, there's a world of possibility out there, and there's a lot of different worlds that you can inhabit, and there's little subtle differences there. I don't know. I got on a bit of a tangent there. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. But I think there's something that I love so much about this character because it is so quirky and so different. And I don't know, it just really grabs me personally. Some of the little techniques and details that are going on here, let's talk about those ones now. I love the fact that he's got that little tie using the Exoforce robot arm piece and one of those slightly larger tooth pieces that also came on quite a bunch of the Hero Factory sets, actually. Just using that there and clipping it onto that white piece there looks exactly like a tie. And I love, too, how that white piece looks like sort of underneath, there's a sort of shirt underneath a suit, and how those black panel pieces sort of nicely frame it to mirror a suit. You know, a fairly straightforward technique there, but still perfectly it's very clear that it is that of a suit for a businessman or a highfalutin man or whatever you want to call them. Very, very nice design in that regard. I also like the chain that's being used as a sort of like monocle, you know, it really makes him look sort of rich and wealthy and possibly even quite like pompous and full of themselves or whatever. They have a lot of influence, you know, it's nice. The eyebrow design is also really cool, especially what I imagine is a posable eyebrow design, which you also don't see that every day. It's amazing how much personality those eyebrows add. You take those off, it would be quite a different mock. You know, just the way they sort of roll over the top of the eyes there, it makes him look a little bit more sort of almost kind of grumpy to a degree. It adds certainly a lot of personality. So I don't know, can you fit eyebrows on your next mock? That's something to think about for sure. I still love the little cane design that he's got and the other accessories that he has, which again, I think adds so much to this. The dollar bills that are sort of in between his fingers there, you know, you get the sense that he's, you know, passing around a lot of money, whether it's through illegal means or all sorts of stuff like that. But the other really cool detail, the little ring that he has there, just sliding on one of the studs that has the hole through the middle and just putting it onto that clip piece there on the finger. Super easy, super simple, and it looks like a ring. Great idea. I absolutely adore that. Very fun little detail there that I think goes a long way. And it's a pretty simple technique too, you know. Bunch of people use that finger design on their mocks, so no reason you couldn't put a ring on. If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. That's really what I'm trying to say. Regardless though, yeah, fantastic mock. A lot of personality to it and just really cool. Fits the Hero Factory world perfectly. Speaking of the Hero Factory world, let's move on to a mock by Okoye, and this is Thunder. So, of course, Thunder was a Hero Factory set and one of the OG villains from the first wave. And I really liked Thunder. I always thought he was quite cool. He was one of the ones that sort of snuck up on me as a set. I remember when it came out, I just kind of dismissed him and I was like, I've got all the other ones. It's fine. Like, I don't need Thunder. And then I just decided to get him one day. I don't know. I kind of had the impression that he wouldn't be that good. But when I built him, he was honestly one of my favorites. It really surprised me at the time. And it's just great to see another really awesome version of Thunder, which I think fits into a fairly similar aesthetic to what we were talking about with Kuroda, of really bulking them out, giving them a more industrial look, and really accentuating details that seem quite fitting for the character. Because once again, Thunder was a little bit more on the skinny side, and I'm also more on the skinny side. So you know what? That's a great thing. But it's also really cool to buff him out. And he's hit the gym, he's done some P90X, and he's ready to go, you know? So, what do I specifically like about this version of Thunder? I spoke about that industrial flair before. I love all the different accent colors in this. So primarily there's silver being used on this mock, with the black sort of being mainly focused on the sort of upper half of the body there. Those are sort of the two main colors. But then you've got these little accent colors of little bits of yellow there. Specifically the sort of larger slope pieces on the torso there. They very much look like kind of caution stripes, something you might see in a industrial area, that sort of thing. And the other little bits of yellow, I don't know, to me it looks like some sort of, sort of safety warnings or things, I don't know if you necessarily put that on a robot per se. Depends on the world you're in. But this is the world of Hero Factory. You can do what you want. But I don't know, I think that looks so cool. It really does make it look, it just has a unique flair to it. And then including the orange and light blue highlights there, the trans ones, I think is also really cool. Whether that's just sort of little lights that they've got or sort of energy coursing through the body. Could be multiple different things, but it certainly looks cool. And those little pops of color there always go a long way. I think it really, to me, this mock would be quite boring if it was just sort of black and silver. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but yeah, there's little sort of hints of color like that really do make it shine even more, which is always cool. I adore this weapon on this guy too. Just the way that his arms really seriously bulk out at the end there, and he has a sort of three-pronged effect. To me, you really get the sense that some sort of orb of thunder or energy would form in between those prongs and launch out. And you could even build that to some degree. You could actually put something in the middle there and really sort of showcase the power and elemental blast or thunder blast, whatever the heck he does. I think that would look really cool, or you could just edit it with some cool Photoshop skills. You do whatever you want, but I think it looks cool and certainly adds a lot of personalities to the character as you really see how they would fight and what sort of things that they would use to cause chaos and be a villain in the Hero Factory world. And yeah, seeing it in this more sort of, I keep saying, industrial light, it very much looks like almost like some sort of crane or some sort of maybe even like a digger machine or something like that, something you might find on like a dock or a construction site perhaps, it just looks really cool. Additionally, too, given how bulky that arm is, you kind of look at the other arm there, the lower arm specifically. That's also pretty bulky and almost sort of disproportionate to the upper arms, which are a little bit more skinny compared to everything else. I actually really like that. And, kind of what we spoke about before with, really bulking out Kuroda. I think there's something to really be said there of how you can really take a lot of creative liberties, really go over the top, really go ham with stuff, and it still works, because you could make the argument, oh, that's not typical human proportions. You gotta match those typical human proportions. Well, what if you don't? Because you look at this here, it's this beautiful hunched, menacing looking character. And the fact that they have taken the liberty to really sort of stretch the truth and not have it fit into a sort of typical mold, I think actually makes it look better. So by all means, play around with stuff. If you want to give them additional limbs or make a part of their body longer than it naturally would be within the typical human proportions, I don't know, what does that communicate? To me, it almost gives it this sense that, because he has this hunch and this more sort of kind of almost more like kind of grounded, sinister look to him, it does plant him more in that villain-focused world, Because I guess when you look at the heroes, like even just on the box art of some of the heroes, they stand quite tall and proud with their chests out, and they have a more sort of straight, angular look to them, whereas the villains are a little bit more sort of like hunched over, and they've got bad posture in that sense. So just sort of in that language of communication, it really showcases these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, So I think it's really worth playing around with some of that stuff to really communicate like, hey, the way that they hold themselves can be a little bit more villainous. But at the same time, you could have them chest up, more elongated and straight in that sense, and that could still be a bad guy, Maybe they are like the last one we saw. They wear a suit and tie, and they're very regal and royal, but they'll still cut your head off if you look at them the wrong way or something, So I don't know, play around with it. How does it fit the character that you're making? What sort of, what does the sort of general shape or stance or posture of the mock say? I think this is a cool example of that, and there's some interesting stuff to learn there for sure. So I think a fantastic revamp of Thunder here, a lot of really cool stuff going on. Love your work. We'll move on to the final mock now. A little bit of a shorter one, not too many, but we're going back to our original roots where I used to do like 3 mocks per episode. But, this is 3 mocks and a bonus mock now, just like the old days. But this is a mock by Mitch Henry, and this is called Lord Overdeath. So this isn't strictly speaking a Hero Factory mock, But I think with what we've been talking about going really over the top with stuff and that kind of language of posture and communication, all that sort of stuff, this mock embodies that very heavily, and I think it really fits into the world of Hero Factory. So I wanted to talk about it anyway, just because, if you want to build your own custom villains within Hero Factory, I think you can get a lot of ideas from this mock here. So let me read the description that Mitch said on the original post. He says, "This is a mock that I've been working on since October 2020, but the character dates back to January 2020. He was having a conversation with a friend of his about the villain in F-Zero GX named Deathborn, and he misremembered the name as Lord Overdeath. And in that moment, Mitch had decided that he needed to build Lord Overdeath immediately. And he said he compiled a list of ideas and reference pictures and asked some of his friends and stuff, and kind of came up with some sketches and different things for this character. And he said that his goal was to make a character that a 12-year-old would think is the most badass thing that they've ever seen, but any adult would probably roll their eyes at, thinking that it was too sort of like over the top or just sort of silly, He also said that he got a lot of advice and different things from different people and, put a lot of different input into this mock as well. So it's cool that it's sort of that collaborative process in that sense. But yeah, let's take a look at Lord Overdeath now, because I think Mitch certainly succeeded in his mission of making this really awesome, badass character that maybe is slightly too over the top, but in all the right ways. So what do I specifically like about it? I love the fact that one of his arms is more sort of primarily like spring green and is just covered in spikes. Because, if things have got spikes on them, of course they're cool, It's got like sharp horns and, you can really take someone out with that. That's awesome, And I also like the fact that it is a different color because it's kind of this like corrupted evil arm. Like, oh no, he's being infected by some sort of, evil virus or some sort of, the shadow is corrupting him and turning him evil and it's left him scarred and deformed. It's certainly leaning into some of those more sort of like almost like anime or cartoon style tropes that are very, edgy for lack of a better term, but are still kind of cool at the end of the day, So I think that's awesome, and it's very fitting for the aesthetic that he was aiming for. But also just really cool to use a whole bunch of those spring green claw pieces, because they're cool pieces, and I do love my spring green. It's a fantastic color, and I think that's just a really solid, hugely spiky arm design there. Additionally to almost the same thing on the sword, there's spikes everywhere on this thing, and it's got, the translucent flames that aren't quite flames, it's almost more sort of like electrical energy perhaps, and it's got, red spikes poking out of it and almost kind of like a shield over the top of it as well, or that could just be additional plating or whatever. And it's also just a massive sword that's almost as big as him, just the fact of that, that with, 3 different wings, a big old armored chest and spikes everywhere on the legs. It's kind of almost like with this philosophy with this mock that it's like, okay, we're going to give him a sword. Well, it needs to be huge, massive, and have spikes everywhere and just be over the top, I think that'd be a really fun way to build something, to go, okay, cool, I've put 20 spikes on it. That's not enough. I need to double that. Or, already this is a pretty large weapon. It needs to be even larger, going big, it's not big enough. You almost need to be too big with it. And the fact that, as you build it, I'm sure you'll be like, I don't know, is this going too far? But if that's the aesthetic you're aiming for, you want to go too far, And sometimes that's also the case. Sometimes you think, I don't know, am I going too far with this? And by pushing the boundaries with it, sometimes you're not going far enough. So it's always good to sort of stretch those boundaries. And hey, maybe you can, much like Mitch, get feedback from some friends and go like, okay, turns out I was going a little bit too far, but now I know the boundaries, Maybe that is a little bit too cheesy or cringy or whatever words you want to use. But it's nice to kind of test the boundaries there and see like, actually, you know what? Maybe this guy could be even more over the top, or that aesthetic's actually exactly what I'm aiming for. I think it's just a great way to learn and grow if you are looking to improve who you are as a builder. Really push the boundaries, test them, do something that you know in your heart. You're like, I don't know, that's probably too much, or that's probably, going a little bit too far. Yeah, play with it. See what happens. Some other stuff that I really enjoy on this mock here is, in some of these pictures here, there's these flags in the background. We've seen some similar stuff on mocks like this before, but I just love that little feature there, just putting some additional little details in the background there just to provide a little bit of extra context, or just to make the mock look even more evil and prominent and awesome. And, he is Lord Overdeath, that's probably the flag of his royal house, or, something crazy like that. It just seems really fitting and really cool. And, it just makes this character really stand out, I suppose. I quite enjoy that. He's also got a cape, which, I enjoy my cape, but, for a really over-the-top character like this, of course they need to have a cape. That's just incredibly fitting and very cool. And something else that I like about this is the necklace around his neck there. Again, something very anime about that, of it's like, my father, when I was young, gave me this necklace, and it's the key to the basement in my house, which I've never been into, and I'm going to spend 3 seasons doing other stuff, but eventually I need to go back, Attack on Titan. I don't know, there's a whole backstory to it, but it's fun and edgy and really cool, and actually does make a really good story. I love Attack on Titan. I'm not bagging on it. Anyway, but it's that. It's like they've got some sort of, prop or artifact or weapon or MacGuffin or whatever, and it's this rich, intricate part of their backstory. That seems so fitting for this. But also, side note, it's a pretty cool necklace. Obviously, it uses the chain pieces that come on a variety of different Bionicle and Hero Factory sets, but actually using the mask there as, the ornate detailing of this necklace works pretty well. Looks pretty cool. And on a large mock like this, you can kind of get away with it being that, naturally kind of slightly larger mask piece there, which may not work on like a Matoran or a Toa, perhaps. But, it's a cool little necklace design. And also, giving your mocks jewelry and things like that, awesome idea. Totally do it. On the subject of this guy being over the top, there's something else I wanted to cover, and we're going to have to talk about Star Wars to do it. So in the movie Solo, A Star Wars Story, there's a background character at the old lodge where we meet Lando Calrissian, and the character's name is Therm Scissor Punch, which in itself is a ridiculous name. But God, it's amazing. And the character himself looks awesome. Again, this big hulking character with like a lobster head, and kind of like lobster arms, but also kind of like shrimp-like at the same time. And I don't even know. He's crazy and weird. And if you read the backstory for him on StarWars.com, it's also like, he's called Therm Scissor Punch because he shoved a like shank into his like lobster claw thing and uses it as a weapon. And I was like, what? It's ridiculous, but kind of cool at the same time, And I think there's something so cool about that, where it is like, in a world like Star Wars, where things are quite quirky and weird, but also really cool at the same time, you really can lean into the weird and obscure. Why not? Name him Therm Scissor Punch, because that's ridiculous, but actually does kind of fit, and it's really cool. And you've got characters like Luke Skywalker, which is just as equally a weird name. Why not put something weird like this in there? I think this is also, of course, my personal opinion. You might disagree with me, but I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool. I think it's wonderfully quirky in all the right ways. And I think stuff like this is perfect for the world of Hero Factory, but also is just perfect for your own unique world, because, of course, this mock isn't in the Hero Factory universe in Mitch's mind, but it fits so well in it at the same time. So, I really like that. And then, and just for posterity's sake, you have people like Elon Sleaze Bogano in Star Wars as well. Again, another weird and quirky name, but he's in a really fun scene in Attack of the Clones where he asks Obi-Wan if he wants to buy some death sticks. He's a fun, weird character, Why not? Fits the world, in my opinion. And I think so does this beautiful character by Mitch here as well. So, by all means, I think it's such a great idea to lean into the really weird, obscure stuff like this and just go over the top, because it's fun, it's different, it's quirky, and it's a mock like this that I think, actually really stands out in all the right ways, and really kind of differentiates itself from the rest of the mocks in the Bionicle community in all the right ways, because that's what Mitch has done. He's challenged stuff, he's pushed the boundaries, and he's done it very, very well. Mitch himself said in the description here, he said he's really excited to show off what may well be his best work to date. Don't disagree with that. This is a fantastic mock, and might indeed be one of his best works, and it's because he's pushing boundaries, so love your work. But anyway, that's it for this Villain Factory-inspired episode of the Bionicle Hero Factory Inspiration Series. Hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully I gave you some ideas that can hopefully inspire you if you want to build something Hero Factory related. And, there's a whole bunch of other Hero Factory. I think we've even done a Villain Factory episode in the past. So if you want to get some further ideas, check that stuff out, and maybe it can get those creative juices flowing as well. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to see some of your own mocks featured on the Bionicle Inspiration Series, send me a submission to the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. Put some pictures, put some info, whatever you want in that email there. Send it my way, and one day it'll be featured on the show. But your patience is key. I've got a lot of submissions to work through, so just wait your turn. But you'll get there eventually. I'll do my best. Additionally, you can head over to my social media. There's links in the description below, so if you want to see stuff that I'm doing out in the real world, out in the LEGO world, out in the community, all that stuff, you can check it out there. And additionally as well, there's links in the description to all the mocks that you saw in today's episode. So by all means, check out some of the other work of these builders, see what they do. You could give those guys a follow, you could like their stuff, you could comment on their stuff, because they deserve it. They're great builders. Let them know your thoughts on their stuff. They'd love to hear it, I'm sure. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Happy building. Bye for now.